Pokerogue is a new shiny Pokemon internet browser game that has taken people and my YouTube feed by absolute storm. In case you missed the name of the game, it's a roguelike game, meaning there's no story, it's all just battling. And the goal is to make it to floor 200 and beat the big bad boss Pokemon with all the gym leaders and trainers along the way. I have 2 runs to show off, so I'll explain everything as we go. When you first start off in Pokerogue, you have no starter Pokemon other than the traditional 27. But as you go along obtaining Pokemon through eggs or simply just catching them in the wild throughout your run, you unlock them as starters permanently. Each Pokemon has a value beside its name, and when you pick your starters, that value can't pass 10. For example, a regular starter Pokemon is 3 points, a Paradox Pokemon, or Mythical, is worth 6 to 7, and a Box Art Legend is 8 to 9, and so on. I've been playing a bunch off camera, and I've obtained a really solid roster of Pokemon to choose from, and been using a certain pair of 2 Pokemon. Duraludon and Aqua Breed Paldean Tauros. Do you notice a trend with these 2? Their stats are absolutely insane for the early game. For example, let's compare Duraludon to, I don't know, let's say Pidgey, and yeah, it's not even close. Since the early game of Pokerogue is very sketchy and requires a little bit of luck, these 2 are good enough on their own to solo till the mid game, until you get some better stuff. But every time I've used them, I've wiped in the late game, since Tauros does fall off quite a bit later. But Arcaludon is a pretty amazing Pokemon with one of the best types in the game. For this game at least. But for this run, I choose 2 other Pokemon that I felt like would benefit me way more in the late game. Jangmo and Beldum. Now I think it's a good time to talk about eggs and egg moves. In this game, you obtain egg vouchers as either items you randomly pick up, or through beating gym leaders, Elite Four, stuff like that for the first time. And with your egg vouchers, you have 3 vending machines to spend your vouchers on. Move Up, Legendary Up, and Shiny Up. Egg Up gives a higher chance of the Pokemon coming with an egg move, and spoiler alert, these moves are ridiculous. Legendary Up gives a higher chance of pulling a broken legendary Pokemon, and Shiny Up gives a higher chance of pulling a shiny Pokemon, which, in this game, does a lot more than flexing on people. The more shiny Pokemon you have in your party, the more your luck score increases, which gives you a higher chance of pulling better items at the end of each battle. Which I guess now is a good time to explain items. After each battle, you get 3 random items to choose from. Along with items at the top, you can choose to purchase with money. These items can be completely useless or completely game-breaking. Items like the Terra Orb, Dynamax Band, and Mega Ring are all extremely rare, while Pokeballs, Lures, and Potions are common and seen in pretty much every battle. So, back to egg moves. These moves are game-warping and are insanely broken. For example, Charmander getting Oblivion Wing, Finizen getting Surging Strikes, and Honedge getting Behemoth Blade, just to name a few. So, knowing that, can you guess what 2 egg moves my Jangmo came with? Glaive Rush and Shell Sidearm. 2 insane moves for Kamo to have in its arsenal. And can you guess what my Beldum came with? Recover. Which is less exciting, I know, but it came in super clutch at times. Alright, so with that, let's get into run number 1. So I lock in with Beldum and Jangmo, and I even got to bring along my shiny Tarountula too, which I got out of a random egg at some point, which was pretty nice since my luck score would be boosted a bit. So the run starts off, and I use Jangmo to completely demolish everything with Glaive Rush and Shell Sidearm, finding a clutch XP charm at stage 5 after the first trainer battle, which will increase my XP earned by 25%. And at stage 8, our first encounter with Ivy, our rival in this game and the most threatening trainer by far. She has a random starter Pokemon and a random regional bird, which she'll keep throughout the game, and for this one she had a Sobble and a Pidove, who fall easily to Jangmo. You're probably wondering why I'm only using Jangmo. This is because in the early game, you want to have one Pokemon sweep and let the others in the back gain XP until you find a biome that they're good against. Since after 10 stages, you move on to another biome, and the biome you're in influences the Pokemon you find. At stage 10, I found a boss Spearow, which boss Pokemon have multiple health bars and extra passive abilities. And when you take out a health bar, they get a stat boost. But I just completely shit on it with Glaive Rush and move on to the plains, which is pretty uneventful until stage 19, where I obtained a map. A rare item that allows you to choose the next biome you want to go to, instead of the game deciding for you. This is huge, since you get to choose what Pokemon you want to find. If you're missing a type, just choose a biome that has that type of Pokemon. Then at stage 20, we gotta fight Silent, the grass gym leader from Unova, who was completely swept by Jangmo and Shell Sidearm. But then on stage 22, I found a shiny Cottony, which was pretty awesome. I caught it and it had both Prankster and a modest nature, which was amazing. And was another shiny to add to the team, which would make my luck even better. Then the second Ivy fight at stage 25, and a Revolved Drizzile was pretty scary. It water pulses and confuses me, but I'm still able to smack it with Glaive Rush and do about half to it. I switch to Cottony and eat a water pulse, and go for a Prankster Stun Spore, which misses on the switched in Tranquil, and I just click it again, which misses again, which was depressing, and it takes me out with Air Cutter. I switch to Jangmo and take it out with Glaive Rush and Shell Sidearm. She sends in Veluza, which goes down again, bringing in her Drizzile, who Jangmo kills with a Glaive Rush, winning me the fight. I then cruise through the rest of the biome, evolving my Tarunchel into Spidops, and Jangmo hitting the level cap, since I forgot to mention, but to prevent people from bulldozing through the game with a single Pokemon, they added level caps. I destroy the boss Shroomish and move on to the Tall Grass, which I got my Beldum to level 20 and it evolved into a Metang, so it wasn't actually completely useless now. Then at stage 36, I found a rogue item, which was a Soul Dew, which in this game is a held item that increases the influence of a stats of natures on a Pokemon, which I give them a Tang since it had a mild nature, so it would influence its special attack stat to grow more. But then on floor 38, I encounter a Low Kicks, who completely swept my team with Lunge, which was an embarrassing loss to say the least. So, attempt 2! I picked the same 3 and go again, finding the Reversal TM on stage 1, which I taught to Jangmo, since it would be helpful against the early game normal types. Then, right after finding the Brick Break TM on stage 7, which I immediately replaced Reversal with. Then the Ivy fight right after, who she had a Turtwig and a Starly, who Jangmo absolutely shit on. Then was extremely smooth sailing for a while. Just the boss Lopunny on stage 20 was a bit sketchy since it had a passive adaptability ability. Wow, say that 10 times fast. But Beldum and Recover just barely managed to beat it. The Metropolis was similarly uneventful, just an Ivy battle at stage 25, which was pretty tight since her team was pretty strong compared to mine. But we got our first Evo at stage 25 and Tarunchel into Spidops. Yeah, fucking skip this one, no one cares. But on the stage right after that one, Beldum evolved into Metang, which was again a huge help. Also, did I mention that evolutions happen mid-battle? But on stage 30, we got paired up against the normal type gym leader Whitney, which was going to be real tough, but I end up clawing out a win with only a weak Jangmo left. The next biome was completely uneventful, so moving on to the construction site, where on stage 44, I encountered and caught a Magnemite, one of the very best Pokemon for this game, which you'll see why later. But just know, this thing is super good and should at least be on one of your winning teams. Then after the next fight, it evolved into Magneton. Then on stage 48, Jangmo finally hit level 35 and evolved into Hakamo'o, gaining Sky Uppercut along with the fighting type. Then as my random item after the fight, got the TM for Dragon Dance, which, yes, is insane. But the reason I chose Kamo is, well, because, again, you'll see later. But Dragon Dance was still very good to have, since, to no one's surprise, setup in this game is incredibly good, and will carry you through fights. Since stat changes carry on from fight to fight, as long as the Pokemon is not withdrawn, for example when entering a trainer battle. Then the boss Machamp was light work since Metang I learned Psychic at level 34. Moving on to the power plant, where I finally found the map on stage 52, but then just cruised through the rest of the stages, fighting Ivy at stage 55, which was light work, finding a Thunderstone to evolve Magneton into Magnezone, and Hakamo hitting level 45, evolving into Kommo-o, and Metang hitting level 45 and evolving into the monster himself, Metagross. Now the game was going to get very easy and repetitive for a while, Kommo-o shitting on everything, until stage 84 in the lake biome, where I found and caught a Ludicolo, since I thought its type would be super helpful for my team. Then at level 68, Kommo-o finally learned its other signature move, Clangorous Soul. This move, for anyone who doesn't know, damages the user for a quarter of their health, but raises all their stats by 1, which is a busted setup move considering Kommo-o's stats and its moves, and will be carrying me through many boss fights. But not on stage 90 against Crasher Wake, where Ludicolo showed its dominance, killing all of his mons with Energy Ball. A pretty common theme in this game is that the early game is very difficult, but then the mid game and somewhat the late game are pretty easy, and once your team is fully evolved and all settled in, you shouldn't have too much trouble. On stage 111, in the Abyss, I found and caught a Grimmsnarl, completing my core of a Dragon, Fairy, and Steel type. A type triangle similar to Fire, Water, Grass, but it is very important in this game for reasons you'll see later. Now, I know this isn't correct because Dragon isn't good against any of these types, but all I'm trying to say is these are the 3 best types in the game and you should be using them. Then on stage 115, this game threw me a fast one and turned a Pokeball into a Rogue Ball, and inside that Rogue Ball was a Mega Bracelet, which, after choosing it, Megastones will become available. And that's a big deal, since Megas are permanent, meaning if I got my hands on a Metagrossite, I'm guaranteed a Mega Metagross for the rest of the run. Nothing else happened until leader Marnie at stage 120, who was shit on by Kommo-o. Moving on to the cave, where on stage 126, I run into a double battle with a Golisopod and an Ursaluna. 2 great Pokemon I'd love to add, but since it's a double battle, I could only pick one to catch. I end up choosing Ursaluna, which is going to help me a ton against the final boss. I find a bunch of memory mushrooms, which act like the move reminder in this game, which allowed me to teach Ludicolo Hydro Pump and Ursaluna a Headlong Rush. I beat the boss Gilmora easily, then move on to the lake, where my first encounter was a Gyarados, which I caught right away and replaced Ludicolo, since I figured Gyarados would be a better Pokemon, with a better type and ability. Nothing interesting happened until floor 145, where we gotta fight Ivy again, and this time, she ain't even saying anything to me. She leads off with her Torterra, and I with Kommo-o, and right away go for a Clangorous Soul. And right away, she brings in her Rayquaza, with 3 health bars and a sweet custom shiny. I go for Glaive Rush, outspeeding it and taking out most of its health bars, while it goes for Solar Beam, which was absolutely pathetic, so I just take it out with Glaive Rush. She brings in her Staraptor, and I take it out with a couple of Glaive Rushes, bringing in her Kingdra, which gets smacked by Glaive Rush, then her Torkoal switches into Tyranitar, who dies to 2 Earthquakes from Gyarados. Torterra took a bit of work to die, but eventually fell to Hurricane and Bite. And lastly was Torkoal, who wasn't too threatening. Then after this fight, nothing interesting happened for a while. Watson on stage 150 was swept, Gyarados got Waterfall, then on floor 153 I got a Flame Orb, and Ursaluna had the Guts ability, which gives it an attack boost if it has a status condition. And yes, before anyone says anything, it bypasses the attack drop from Burn. But after that, nothing until stage 181. No new Pokemon, items, no Megastone for Gyarados or Metagross, nothing. But on stage 182, we gotta get through a random Elite Four and Champion. We get the Alola Elite Four, starting with Hala, who Metagross completely swept with Psychic. Moving on to Olivia, who was slightly harder but still easy. Next up was Acerola, who posed a bit more of a threat, but Guts, Ursaluna, and Payback took out a large portion of her team, with Metagross finishing her off. And it was the stage after where I picked up an Ability Charm, an item that dramatically increases the chance of a wild Pokemon to have its hidden ability, which, of course, the game gives me right at the very end. Appreciate that one. Lastly was Kahili, which my team handled just fine. And moving on to the champion, How. But before that, I got a flying Terra Shard from my rewards, which I give to Kamo for some unknown reason. I really don't know why. But now, moving on to the champion, How. He leads off with an Alolan Raichu, and I with my Terra Flying Kamo, which some idiot decided was a good idea. So, I switch to Ursaluna and eat the Zippy Zap. I predict the switch, so I go for Slash, and he switched to Noivern, and Slash does a ton to it. I switch to Magnezone, eat an Air Slash, while he switches back to Raichu and eats my Flash Cannon. I'll go for Tri-Attack, and he goes for a priority Zippy Zap, which is an absolutely disgusting move. It's a 50 base power physical electric move that has a guaranteed chance to raise the user's evasion. So, basically a built-in double team, which is complete horseshit. But I go back to Ursaluna and he switches into Terra Water Lapras, which Slash does a chunk to. I make a super risky switch into Kamo, which for some stupid reason is Terra Flying, and I eat the Water Pulse, and I go for a super risky Clangorous Soul, and surprisingly I live the Freeze Dry, and I go for Close Combat while he switches into Raichu, but I still end up taking it out. He then brings in his Terra Psychic Solgaleo! The f***? I go for Glaive Rush and do about half before I go down to Photon Geyser. I go into Gyarados and Intimidate it before realizing this thing has Full Metal Body, which prevents stat drops. But I go for Crunch and surprisingly live a Photon Geyser, and Crunch just gives him a small freaking belly rub, and he takes me out. I go into Grimmsnarl and go for Foul Play before he switches into a Tapu Fini. I go for Spirit Break to lower its special attack, and it goes for Moonblast, which I surprisingly live, and Spirit Break does a chunk. I switch to Magnezone and eat the Moonblast, then go for a Discharge while he switches to Terra Fire Incineroar. And from this point forward, we play a huge game of chicken, just switching back and forth. Oh yeah, his Incineroar has Sacred Fire, by the way, which I'm not surprised. But in the end, Metagross carried, taking out Incineroar with Stone Edge, Terra Psychic Solgaleo, and Tapu Fini with Meteor Mash. And finally, Noivern with Bullet Punch. Absolute MVP. Oh yeah, and my boy Magnezone took out the Terra Water Lapras. So now, we're in the end game. And this biome is full of Paradox Pokemon that you cannot catch because this game is cruel as hell. I remember really wanting an Iron Crown for one of my runs, and when I came to this biome, I was super pumped until I saw the message and got crippling depression. Now on floor 195 is the final fight with Ivy. She leads off with Torterra and I with Ursaluna. I hit a switch to Magnezone and she fucking headlong rushes my Magnezone and absolutely smokes it. I go into my Terra Flying Kamo, which is actually useful for once, and risk a Clangorous Soul, and this fool switches into Tyranitar, letting me set up for free. And Kamo goes on an absolute rampage, taking out T-Tar, Torkoal, and Kingdra, but has to take a little break when Staraptor comes in, which Metagross handles with a Stone Edge. Second to last is her Torterra, which I hit a switch into Gyarados and eat a headlong rush, getting a pretty nice Intimidate on it. Torterra eventually takes out Gyarados, so I switch into Kamo and hit a Clangorous Soul. Since the last time Kamo was in against Torterra, it switched. Same thing happened here. She switched into her shiny Mega Rayquaza with 4 health bars. I get my boost and go for a massive Glaive Rush, which does 3 of its health bars, an absolute gargantuan amount of damage. Which just gets mostly healed because of the multitude of berries this thing had. But I get taken out with Outrage, so I switch into Grimmsnarl, eat the Outrage, and hit it with a Spirit Break, which does a lot. I go for Spirit Break again, and this thing switches into Torterra again, which I take out. Rayquaza comes in, and I click Spirit Break, but this thing V-creates and drops Grimmsnarl. I go into Metagross and click Meteor Mash. I somehow outspeed the Mega Ray, and Meteor Mash picks up the kill. Now on floor 200 was the final boss against Eternatus, which Ursaluna puts in absolute work, bringing it down to red, and holy shit, yeah, no, the final boss is Eternamax, which has some pretty good stats, I think you can agree with me. But at least the battle changes to a 2-on-1. And I'll give y'all a friendly tip to beat this piece of shit. Passive damage moves do a shit ton of damage to this thing. I'm talking Burns, Leech Seed, Whirlpool, Sand Tomb, Salt Cure. Any of those moves are essential to beating this guy. He also had a special ability called the Black Hole, which drags an item from one of your Pokemon to itself after every turn. And remember that Flame Orb I picked up on Ursaluna on stage 153? Yep, because of its Black Hole, it stole my Flame Orb, burned itself, and with a combination of that and my attacks, it fell pretty easily. Now, let's get into my second run, and just a bit of backstory before this run. On one of my other runs in the egg gacha, I got a pink legendary egg, which after 100 fights will hatch into a super powerful legendary Pokemon worth 8 to 9 points. In other words, box art legendaries and others like Mewtwo, Kyurem, and Eternatus. So, knowing that, which legendary did the Pokerogue gods decide to give me? Kyogre? Rayquaza? Giratina? Miraidon, the electric dragon type dirt bike from Pokemon Violet. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how this thing is OP as hell, but all you need to know is that its stats are insane, its ability is beyond insane, and it came with the most busted egg move ever. Hadron Engine is Miraidon's ability, and what it does is that it sets electric terrain on the field, which lasts for 5 turns. Also boosting Miraidon's already strong electric moves by 50%. Hadron Engine also gives Miraidon a special attack boost whenever electric terrain is active, meaning it gets a free +1 special attack while making its electric type moves stronger because of electric terrain. And can you guess what broken egg move Miraidon got access to? Out of any move, which did the developers give it? Dragon Energy, an 150 base power special dragon move that does less damage the lower Miraidon's HP is at. Meaning, if Miraidon is at full health, this thing's base power is 150, and it hits both Pokemon in doubles. And with all of Miraidon's boosts it gets, this thing is a guaranteed nuke that can kill anything. So, long story short, this Pokemon is OP as f***. Alright, let's get into the run 2. So since Miraidon costs 9 points, I lock in with Miraidon and my shiny Tarantula, since I swear this thing gives me good luck. Which that luck gets put to use on the first stage, giving me a Focus Band, which is a Rogue Ball item, and the map on stage 17. But to absolutely no one's surprise, I just sweep everything in the early game, since the Pokemon here are ass. And did I mention I'm starting with a Miraidon with Dragon Energy? But on stage 28, I found a Frogadier, which I caught and I didn't even realize it, but you can see the ability. It has Battle Bond, which is an ability that changes Greninja into its Ash form whenever it takes a kill, which we'll be seeing later. Then, on stage 31, I found a Drillbur, and since I've learned that Excadrill is a busted fucking Pokemon, so good. I caught it. Then, nothing for a long while, just evolved my 2 dudes, got to use Ash Greninja, smoked a few gym leaders. Then, on stage 68, found a wild Torterra, which I caught. Then, on stage 69, nice, Miraidon learned Electro Drift, its signature move, which is an 100 base power, 100 accuracy special electric move that has its power boosted if the move is super effective. Yeah, it's a pretty nasty attack. Then again an absolute snooze fest until stage 95, where conveniently, right after the Ivy fight, I found a Mega Ring to evolve, let's see, none of my Pokemon. Then stage 111, where I found and caught an Alakazam, which, hey, can actually Mega Evolve. And cause I thought it'd be pretty good against Eternatus. Next, on stage 141 in the temple biome, I found one of my new favorite Pokemon from Gen 9, Golden Go. Then smoked Ivy on stage 145, and you want to see something satisfying? So for this run, this was looking to be the final squad, which was honestly pretty good. I wasn't really struggling with any battles. Oh god, I hope not. Stage 182 came quickly, which was time for me to take on the Elite Four. I ended up getting the Sinnoh Elite Four, so Aaron was up first, who was swept by Miraidon. Next was Bertha, who was swept by Miraidon. Then came Flint, who was swept by Miraidon. Last of the Elite Four was Lucian, which, hey, guess what? Was also swept by Miraidon. Lastly was the champion Cynthia, and you want to see the power of Dragon Energy Miraidon? Well, here you go. Yep, completely unfair, but at least it's on my side. Now was the final fight with Ivy. The only one that people care about. Which, I only have one thing I want to show you for this fight. Now onto Eternatus. But before doing that, I got a DNA Splicers, which is an item to fuse 2 of your Pokemon. Kind of like a certain Pokemon fan game. It's really complicated, but here's how it works. Thanks, Wiki, appreciate it. And I used it on Golden Go and Alakazam. Wanted to get a Steel Psychic type, but I f***ed it up and I got a Psychic Ghost type. Instead, it was, yeah, good one, genius. Now onto Eternatus. Pretty much Excadrill bodied the first half with 2 Earthquakes. Then a combination of my guys, mainly Torterra's Leech Seed, which I kept on it for exactly this fight, and I won. So those were my 2 runs through Pokerogue. If you want to try it out for yourself, I highly recommend trying it out. It's completely free to play on any internet browser, and it's very addicting, trust me. But that's all I want to show for this one, so I want to thank y'all for watching, and have a good one. See y'all later.